Nation, Brave New Sex Fictions, and editor of Bad Jobs. She's also the author of Every Inch a Woman, Phallic Possession, Femininity in the Text, one of my favorite titles ever. and Wreck Beach. Some people I know regard Carellin as the Camille Paglia meets Pat Califia in the Pacific Northwest, but I'd rather call her a dear friend. Carellin.
Wow, you don't get an introduction like that every day. So I, in addition to this sterling roster of published works that Dan outlined, I also worked as an editor with New Star Books, which is a local publisher, and as a matter of fact, the publisher of New Star Books, Rolf Maurer, is over there at the side, along with Jamie, a loyal volunteer. And so we have some of our books over there if you want to take a look at them afterwards. But I thought that it would be really interesting when we're talking about libraries and the importance of local acquisition development, if I told you just a little bit about New Star's experience, both historically and more recently. Now, New Star does publish BC books mostly, Canadian books, BC books, and in the late 1970s, I don't know how many of you remember that New Star had a kind of run on labor books. They would do these mass market paperbacks by, you know, guys like Stan Persky and Dan Gawthrop, you know, things like Son of Socrates was a title. And these books used to sell quite well. And Carolyn said that the current definition of a bestseller is a book that sells 5,000 copies. In fact, these books would sell between 5,000 and 15,000 copies. So you can imagine what a boon that was to a local publisher like New Star, a small press. And a lot of these copies were, as a matter of fact, sold in places like Safeway. They were sold in supermarkets and in those little revolving kiosks that you often still see in the supermarket. So there was a distributor that took care of selling those books, and it was called Vancouver Magazine Distributors, VanMag for short. And at a certain point, they were taken over by the News Group, which is a distributor owned by Jimmy Pattison. Now, I don't know if anyone here has a long enough memory to remember that there was a book on Pattison published by New Star Books, and it was just called Pattison. And it was one of those, you know, Son of Socrates style books. And at a certain point, after that book was published, quite soon afterwards, in fact, the News Group began returning all of New Star's titles. And for some reason, they just didn't want to sell or stock New Star titles in places like Safeway anymore. And so, as you can imagine, when you lose that big venue, your sales plummet. And we're only now, New Star's only now getting back to the point it was at in the late 70s and early 80s in terms of sales. So you can see that having someone who's committed to local and committed to local distribution is really important. Small publishers are facing the same thing with BC Ferries now. What's happened is that BC Ferries is saying that they don't want to continue to stock BC books. I don't know if you've been in Safeway, you know that they only stock, you know, American bestsellers now. But maybe if you've been on the ferry, you've wandered into the gift shop, you see that they have like a section of, you know, BC books. Don't buy these, they're not so great. And then they have the sort of Hollywood bestsellers over here. These are the real shit, right? So, so now they've said, you know, these BC books don't sell too well. We don't want to sell these. We don't want to carry as many of these as we have. And in fact, BC publishers have an industry group called the Association of Book Publishers of BC. And when that group requested the sales information from the ferries, they found out that in fact the ferries claimed that the BC books weren't selling just isn't true. So it's not that these books don't sell, it's that they're local, and local is somehow perceived as not as good. And that's really important when you think about local acquisition development for the library. You need people on the ground in the specific area who understand the specific territory that they're in and understand that in fact local is good. We know that about the 100-mile diet, and we should know it about books as well. In these economic times, libraries are going to become more important rather than less important because people are now losing their jobs When they lose their jobs, they're losing, for example, their internet access, and now they're going to the library to try and find another job. They're unable to buy stuff like books, so they're going to the library to look for books. These are all important things that the library needs to do. In an economic downturn, the library's role needs to be expanded rather than curtailed for the benefit of the entire populace. I myself am an enthusiastic library user and a voracious reader. There are times in my life when I've read up to 10 books a week, although I want to tell you, unlike Carolyn, who's very conscientious, mine are all trash. Nothing but crap. And so it's wonderful to have it's wonderful to have a great library system that provides me with my fix. But what's even more wonderful, and what I noticed about the Vancouver Public Library a few years ago, and it inspired one of the few laudatory letters I've ever written to a large organization. I often write complaint letters, but I find much less reason to write complimentary letters, was that I could phone up the Vancouver Public Library and there's never a question that I could ask them that they could not answer, that they did not want to answer, that they were not cheerfully ready to answer. And you may think, so what? This is a library and that's their job. But you know what? I also do research at the University of British Columbia, at the library there. And I have gone to the reference desk a number of times and said, I can't find this reference, can you help me? And, oh. Well, have you looked it up on the internet? Seriously, these people act like they have walked in that day and, oh, it's not, is it a book. The Vancouver Public Library is unique and wonderful, and I'm thrilled to be speaking in support of it tonight. Thank you.